Body language as a medium of communication. When a person comes into a contact with other people, he or she will inevitably communicate directly or indirectly. Frank Van Em, 1989, reports that communication takes place through using words, via voice, or spoken language, and without or alongside the use of words. People use non-spoken language or non-verbal communication. Mehrabian, 1968, believes that people always use body language in daily contact. He argues that the fact of looking at someone, for instance, means something completely different from not looking at him or her during a face-to-face interaction. A person does not talk continuously, but gives out signals continuously through body language when he or she is in someone else's company. Many investigators estimate that at least 70% of the communication between people takes place through body language and tone of voice. The best-known theory dealing with nonverbal communication is that of Mehrabian, 1968. He states that when it comes to expressing feelings, 55% of the communication consists of body language, 38% of the communication is through tone of voice, and only 7% is communicated through words. If this is the case, then people express 93% of their feelings in a nonverbal way. A study conducted by Frank Van Em, 1989, suggests that body language is an easier way of expressing feelings than spoken language. For example, people cannot say to someone easily that they do not like him or her, but through body language people can show their feelings openly. Frank, 1989, concludes that the spoken language is quite limited and people need more body language in communication. Still, spoken language and body language are complementary elements in the process of communication. When someone says something, information is conveyed through body language at the same time. This extra nonverbal information, that is to say body language, can support the content of the message or may contradict it. Frank, 1989, illustrates this idea by giving an example of a patient in the dentist's waiting room rocking on his chair, but he says he is not nervous. When we contradict his words through his body language, his nonverbal message rocking on chair is almost regarded as the truest part. People get the feeling that something is not right through his behavior, and for the most part people are inclined to rely on this feeling. Body language often gives an unclear feeling in the receiver. For example, I have the feeling that he lies to me, or I doubt her sincerity. F.R. Oakes, 1975, reports that it is not easy to express these feelings in words and the assumed meaning is not easy to prove. Still, people can learn to recognize and interpret the nonverbal behavior. 2. Is body language an innate or an acquired behavior? Body language is thought to be an instinctive behavior. Julius Fast, 1978, states that people's brains are programmed in such a way that the corners of the mouth are pulled up with joy, that the eyebrows are pulled up, and that a corner of the mouth goes up according to the feeling that is fed to the brain. Fast, 1978, also maintains that a person can express feelings of fear, enjoyment, sadness, and other primary human feelings without having to learn them. But this does not mean that people do not have to learn to recognize gestures, which can mean one thing in one society and something else in another. Oakes, 1975, argues that many signals are not universal. In America and most European countries, people shake their head when they mean no and nod when they mean yes. But there are cultures, for example in India or in Greece, when people mean the opposite. Up and down means no and shaking means yes. Oakes, 1975, concludes that the latter could be an evidence that body language is taught rather than innate. 3. Body language as a source of credibility. Body language is given a high reliability value by many research. Fast, 1978, believes that the reason behind this is related to the fact that a lot of nonverbal behaviors are hereditary or taught to everyone in the same way at a very young age. Furthermore, Oakes, 1975, explains that people have already noticed many times that body language unveil the truth more than words, which make them automatically doubt the words when they do not correspond to the nonverbal signals. Bergen, 1985, says, adults' reliance on nonverbal cues is greatest when the verbal and nonverbal messages conflict. The verbal and nonverbal coding systems are more equal in their contribution to meaning. Bergen, 1985, maintains that nonverbal communication is present and active in interaction with newborns. Humans learn to trust nonverbal cues long before adopting the verbal version of communication. Anderson and Garrison, 1979, report that nonverbal communication belongs to genetic system. The nonverbal perceptions are neurophysiologically more powerful and earlier, whereas the verbal perception language evolved recently in newborns. Philpott, 1983, asserts that in many cases of doubt and uncertainty about the meaning of the message, over 30% of variance in meaning is imputed to verbal communication, and what remains is attributed to nonverbal communication. Ekman, 1969, 49-58, states that body language is a hidden system of communication that is used mostly unconsciously. It is near spontaneous and less intentional than verbal communication. There is an old saying which supports this claim. It says that actions speak louder than words and the eyes are the window of the soul.
Nonverbal metacommunication.
Metacommunication means communicating about communication itself. For instance, to address the other person about his method of communicating. The speaker could say, "You say that it does not matter to you that our appointment is cancelled, but I can see in your face and hear from your voice that you are disappointed. Are not you?" The content of a message is often represented in words and the relation is made clear by means of body language. Frank, 1989, claims that people use metacommunication through body language the whole day and it is usually more effective. For example, an angry look, a dismissal with the hand, a smile or a friendly pinch can express people's feelings more easily than words in conversation. People can be surprised when a person addresses them on the relational aspects of the communication, when for example a person says something about their facial expression instead of about the content of their message. Still, metacommunication is very important within a relationship to get intentions and relations clear. However, some people actually know how to disturb the communication by metacommunicating at the wrong moment. When it should be about content, they give an answer on a relational level, and when they are addressed on their method of communicating they refer to the importance of the content. 5. Kinesics. Kinesics is the study of communication through body movements, gestures. Kinesics typically include hand and arm movements, movements of the trunk, legs and feet, and body postures. Some researchers such as Harper, 1978, also considers facial expressions, for instance eye contact, as part of kinesics. These distinctions will be discussed under the following titles: facial expressions, eye gaze, gestures, hand and arm movement, and body postures. 6. Facial expressions. The face, including the eyes and mouth, is a powerful channel that conveys many emotional information. Poets and philosophers have always been aware of the role played by the face in communication. Proust, 1962, 105–106, maintains that the features of our face are hardly more than gestures which have become permanent. Scholars like Ekman, 1975, 14–26, recognizes 10 basic classes of facial expressions: disgusts, anger, determination, fear, happiness, interest, sadness, bewilderment, contempt and surprise. In an experiment, Ekman, 1967, flashed pictures of facial expressions on a laboratory screen at the speed of 100 of a second. People staring at the screen insisted that they saw nothing but a blank screen. But when they are asked to guess what facial expression might be depicted by an image they perceived subliminally, they were surprised to discover that most of their guesses correspond to correct expressions of the unseen faces. Ekman concludes that people have the perceptual ability to decode facial message at 100 of a second. Eibsfeld, 1972–1979, conducted a research on blind children from birth, and he reveals that these children employ very similar facial expressions to those of sighted children. De Paulo, 1981, 50–59, believes that the face is often under the closest scrutiny of others, and whatever messages a person sends from the facial region will be picked up by people, at least on a subliminal level. Other researches conducted by Fridley, 1991, show that smiling is performed primarily in others' presence. Therefore, it is not an internal emotional state. The closer a person is with another, the more they smile. Emerson, 1963, 153, states that a man finds room in the 5 square inches of his face for the traits of all his ancestors, for the expression of all his history and his wants. 7. Eye gaze. Eye gaze is an important channel in interpersonal communication. Cranach, 1971, 137–139, makes a distinction between one-sided look, as a gaze by one person in the direction of another's face, mutual look, in which two people gaze at each other's face, and eye contact, in which two people look into each other's eyes and are aware of the other's gaze. Hess, 1974, 139–141, makes a field of study that he calls pupillometrics. His research shows that when people look at a pleasing sight, their pupils dilate measurably. Conversely, when they look at something that is displeasing, their pupils are constricted. Actually, people interacting with each other seem to respond to pupil dilation at least on an unconscious level. Hess, 1974, shows a group of photographs to male subjects, including 2 identical photos of some pretty girl. In one photo, her pupils are enlarged through a retouching process. The male's response, measured by increases in the size of their own pupils, are more than twice as positive to the picture with dilated pupils. Researchers report that the management of eye gaze seems to respond to certain social and cultural attributes, such as sex, degree of acquaintance and culture. Hall, 1978, reports that men look at each other less than women do. He explains that this behavior may be related to homosexual implications of longer glances, especially in contact with unacquainted males. Lamb, 1981, 44, finds that the degree of visual interaction becomes high in couples with a good relationship. Studies of eye management across cultures reveals that there is a great variation in this aspect of communication. Goffman, 1963, 132–135, states that British etiquette forces the speaker and the listener nods and murmurs to signal that he is listening. Germans tend to maintain a steady gaze while talking. Bolivians, Peruvians, and Chileans consider insulting the absence of eye contact while talking. Goffman, 1963, concludes that the differences in eye gaze pattern across cultures is not clear. 8 gestures. Hayes, 1963, 105 to 115, divides gestures into 3 categories: autistic gestures, technical gestures, and folk gestures. Autistic or nervous gestures are made by individuals in response to their own inner turmoil. They may take the form of biting the lips or fingernails, cracking the knuckles, jiggling a leg, or twitching a facial muscle. Technical gestures include such complex system of communication as the sign language of the deaf, the gestures of the referees, military salutes, or traffic directions. Technical gestures are taught formally. Folk gestures, on the other hand, are the property of an entire culture and are passed on by imitation. For instance, residents of Europe and North America point with the forefinger and the other fingers are curled under the palm. Whereas American Indians, certain sub-Saharan Africans point with their lips. Members of the same culture share a common nonverbal behavior. They tend to read a given nonverbal signal in the same way. If 2 people use a nonverbal signal in a different way, it is an evidence that they belong to different cultures, as reported by Hayes, 1963. Actually, gestures tend to be tied to speech processes, that is to say, they are so habitual that communicators continue to use them, for instance while talking on the phone even if there is no visual interaction. 9 arm and hand movements. Friedman, 1972, 153 to 160, distinguishes 2 categories of arm and hand movements: object-focused movements and body-focused movements. Object-focused movements are related to formal or contextual aspects of the accompanying speech, that is to say, the main function of these gestures is to support speech. They take place at a distance away from the body. Body-focused movement, on the other hand, are movements of the hands in which the body or an object are touched. For instance, playing with a pen or smoothing the hair. These hand movements are usually not related to aspects of the accompanying speech. Francis, 1979, 59 to 530, conducts studies in object-focused movements in which subjects are engaged in same-sex and opposite-sex dyadic conversations. She concludes that discomfort during the conversation is expressed by men through an increase in physical activity, whereas in women these feelings are expressed through reduced mobility. Studies in body-focused movement in which couples communicate with each other reveal that women show more body-focused movements than do men. Beyer and Sternberg, 1977, 106 to 110, find little difference between men and women in the use of body-focused movements. The only difference is that women plucked at their hair more than did men. 10 body postures. Human bodies are jointed and hang in the same fashion. People around the globe share the same basic postures and body orientation principles as sitting, standing and lying. Mole, 1980, 11-20, believes that people can tell something about a person when they notice his or her body posture. The way people hold themselves gives important information about their emotional and psychological state. Mole, 1980, maintains that a person who is feeling sad will give that information by the posture of his shoulder sagging, and also by the way he has his head down and very little eye contact. Sociologist Lawrence, 1960, 380-385, believes that the popularity of one posture over another and the emotion conveyed by a given posture seem to be largely determined by cultural norms. Mole, 1980, has a well-known theory on body postures. He states that there are two basic groups of body postures: open-closed postures and forward-backward postures. He illustrates this theory through his famous design. Table 1: Postures and Body Orientations. Open and closed body positions. Open positions consist of knees apart, legs stretched out, elbows away from the body, hands not touching, legs uncrossed, etc. Mole, 1980, maintains that individuals with open body positions are perceived more positive and persuasive than others with closed body positions. Closed body postures consist of legs crossed at either knees or ankles, hands folded, arms crossed, etc. In forward and backward positions, Mole names these postures trunk lean, that is the direction in which one intercalent positions his or her trunk forward toward or backward away from in relation to the other interactant. Mole, 1980, reports that individuals who engage in forward trunk leans increase the verbal output of their interactant partners more than those who do not. Moreover, Mole, 1980, claims that when the posture groups are combined they reveal four basic modes: responsive, open and forward; reflective, open and backward; combative, closed and forward; and fugitive, closed and backward. The following table illustrates very clearly the four basic modes and the possible body postures which accompany them. 1.3. Paralinguistic. Paralinguistic or paralanguage is the study of the nonverbal characteristics of speech, which include such vocal elements as pitch, rhythm, tempo, resonance, and accent. Burgeon, Buller and Woodhall, 1996, report that each individual has a unique voice like fingerprints. No two voices are exactly the same. Researches by Ekman, 1969, 49-58, reveals that paralinguistic or vocalic carry in it nonverbal messages which may influence the verbal communication. For example, the word yes may have different interpretations if we take into consideration one's tone of voice, like agreement, affirmation, confusion, boredom, impatience, and many other messages. According to Ekman, 1969, paralinguistic have several functions with relation to verbal communication. Among these functions or roles, we find repetitive role. For example, an enthusiastic tone of voice which is accompanied with a nod reinforce the word yes to signal affirmation. Complementary role, which consists of adding some extra linguistic elements to complete the verbal message, like, for instance, saying no to a child in a loud, angry voice. Actually, repetitive and complementary roles have the same function. The only difference between them is that repetitive role is often accompanied with a gesture, whereas complementary role is not. Accenting role, which aims to stress part of a verbal message, like in saying please, can you help me, by accenting on the word please. Substitution role, which consists of the replacement of a whole verbal sentence. For instance, the vocal expression ahame substitutes the verbal massage I understand what you are saying. Finally, control or regulation role. Pauses such as more inhalation of air may play the role of preventing another person from interrupting the flow of a conversation, and also may signals to the other person that it is his or her turn to speak. 1.4.0 Proxemics. Proxemics is the study of special territory for the purpose of communication. Haydock, 1978, 118, defines personal space as the area which individuals actively maintain around themselves in which others cannot intrude without arousing discomfort. Studies which are conducted by Thomas, 1973, 15-18, indicate that individuals perceive a distance that is appropriate for different types of messages. For instance, a very close distance between two interact partners may be used for confidential conversations. Thomas, 1973, supports the hypothesis that the violation of personal space can have serious negative effects on communications. Edward Tharley, 1963, 162-185, leads researches on the perception and use of space, proxemics, and he shows that individuals follow predictable patterns in establishing the distance between themselves and those with whom they interact. Hall, 1963, establishes a famous theory by dividing interpersonal space into 4 zones. The intimate zone, 0 to 45 centimeters. It is an emotionally charged zone which is often used for whispering, lovemaking, protecting by intimate friends and family members. Children constitute an exception to this rule, since they have no idea about personal space boundaries and they often feel free to penetrate adults' zone and often climb over them. The personal zone, 45 to 120 centimeters. It is used for informal contact between friends. It is a small protective sphere or bubble which separates one person from another. Most of people's daily interactions occurs within this zone. It makes touch more difficult and, in the same way, it classifies the relations which occur in this zone as being non-intimate. The social zone, 120 to 360 centimeters. It is the casual interaction distance between acquaintances and strangers, used in business meeting, classroom, and interpersonal social affairs. It is the distance that businessmen, doctors, and professors use to convey their profession and avoid giving the impression of an intimate relationship. The public zone, 360 to 750 centimeters. It is an interaction distance that is used for one-way communication from speaker to audience and necessitate a louder voice. This zone is often reserved for high-status officials and celebrities. It often includes stylized gestures and more distinct enunciation. 1.4.1 Distance parameters. Moll, 1980, 11-20, believes that the mutual distances people choose during interactions have several goals. It signals information about how intimate and how personal is the relationship between the interactants, and it also indicates the nature of the topic of discussion. Actually, the appropriate use of distance between talking partners is regulated by social and cultural norms. Hall, 1963, reports that cultures have different perceptions of where the boundaries of the self are located. For instance, the Arab culture tolerates crowding, noises levels, touching of hands and eye-gazing that would overwhelm Westerners. Frank, 1989, 181-195, asserts that if somebody comes close to us than we are used to, invading our personal space, he or she can give us uneasy feelings. People feel inclined to take a step backward to establish the original personal space in which people feel comfortable. This behavior indicates people wish to trace out their personal territory. Fisher and Byrne, 1975, 15-21, conclude that women, when they have enough room, tend more than men to place their belongings beside themselves. Under these circumstances, men place their belongings opposite themselves. This arrangement of belongings may serve as a special marker to keep the seat unoccupied for as long as possible. Mole, 1980, 11-20, reports that changing interaction distance between two individuals can convey a desire of intimacy, declare a lack of interest or increased decrease of domination. Police interrogators assume that invasion of the suspect's personal space by sitting closer or crowding strategy give the officer a psychological advantage over a suspect. Mole, 1980, maintains that the voice qualities and the subject of the conversation is conditioned by the handling of distances. There are certain private conversations that are difficult to talk about unless one is within the proper conversational zone. For instance, the telling of a secret at distance of 200 centimeters is not only difficult but negates the confidentiality of the message itself. Introduction. The present study seeks to examine the validity of the assumptions and hypotheses proposed in the literature about the use of NVC in conversation. In this respect, some scholars like Hall, 1963, suggest that the interactants follow predictable patterns of NVC in interaction situations and that there are particular factors that motivate the interactants such as sex and social status. Actually, the categories of NVC under investigation are dealt with separately and independently in order to avoid any contradictions between the results. In this way, I have given each category particular name, for example facial expressions and eye gaze, and I have reported the result in tables. The results stand for the frequency of occurrence of the informant's NVC, and finally I have interpreted these results and attempted to account for the main factors which influence the informant's use of non-verbal communication in conversations. 2.5 Spatial behavior. In the literature on distance, a distinction has been made between interpersonal interaction distance and invasion. The parameters which have been used in the analysis refer to Hall's theory on distance. By invasion I mean the violation of personal space. The analysis of the data reveals that social status, sex, and the degree of intimacy influence the informants in establishing the distance between themselves and their interaction partners. The following table shows this NVB pattern more accurately. Table 1 _ the distribution of distance variable among the informants in social interaction. The frequency of occurrence used in Table 1 represents the number of times the informants use their personal distance in conversations. The results in Table 1 show that the most important factor which influence the use of distance in conversation is the degree of intimacy between the informants. Informants who share a high degree of intimacy such as intimate friends or family members appear to interact within personal distance 83.64% of the time in comparison with low-distance informants 16.63%. Moreover, female informants exhibit 64.04% of interaction within personal distance than do males 35.96%. This finding reveals that women show a tendency to use a short distance of interaction during conversations. Likewise, superior informants appear to interact within large distance 79.46% than subordinate informants 20.54%. Actually, superior informants have a tendency to exhibit their dominance though interacting within large distance, which confirms the hypothesis of dominance exhibited through distance in cross-status encounters. On the other hand, direct observation of the informant's reaction to invasion reveal that most of the informants react negatively when their personal space is invaded by strangers. Conversely, invasion between intimate informants does not generate negative reactions, and the number of times invasion occurs between intimate informants is higher 73% than between strangers 15%. The following table illustrates this behavior more accurately. Table 2 underscore the distribution of the frequency of occurrence of invasion among the informants in social interaction. Table 2 presents a comparison between low-distance and intimate informants on the basis of the frequency of occurrence of intrusion between themselves. Actually, low-distance informants show a tendency to avoid intrusion between themselves, that they exhibit only 15% of intrusion than intimate informants 73%. This tendency among low-distance informants may be due to the fact that people tend to avoid too much intimacy with strangers by leaving a large distance of interaction between themselves and their interaction partners where intrusion becomes impossible. 3.2.0 Facial expressions and eye gaze. Researches on NVC reveals that the management of visual behavior differs from one individual to another. Grenache, 1971, 180 to 186. Furthermore, the social attributes of the interactants are a crucial determinant of visual behavior. I shall use the following items in the analysis: eye gaze, pupil dilation, and smiling behavior. The results are presented on the basis of both qualitative and quantitative data. Interpretation of the attested tendencies will be done in a systematic way. 3.2.1 Eye gaze. Systematic observation of the informant's eye gaze behavior shows that social status, sex, and degree of intimacy play an important role in determining the use of eye gaze during interpersonal interaction. The following table may serve as an illustration. Table 3 underscore eye gaze behavior variables among the population according to sex, status, and degree of intimacy. The above results reveal that female informants look at their interactant partners 68.42% of the time more than males do 31.58% in face-to-face interactions. A possible explanation of this tendency is that visual cues in the social surroundings are more important to women than to men. Hall, 1978. Moreover, the social status of the informants appears to influence the use of eye gaze. Superior informants, that is to say, informants who belong to high social class, are observed to use 68% of eye gaze when addressing subordinate informants who use only 32%. This result confirms the hypothesis which claims that official and high-rank individuals demonstrate their authority and power through eye gaze dominance. Furthermore, conversations which involve low-distance informants show 28.29% of eye gaze between them, while intimate informants exhibit 71.71% of eye gaze. This tendency of eye gaze behavior among low-distance informants may be due to the assumption that people often avoid too much intimacy with strangers by using the minimum of eye gaze. 3.2.2 Smiling. Some researchers such as Bird-Wistel, 1970, and Knapp, 1972, consider smiling an important element of facial expressions. In the literature, a distinction is made between males and females regarding smiling behavior during greetings and leave-lakings. Findings derived from the analysis of smiling reveal that female informants show a tendency to smile more often 70.67% than do males 29.33%. The following table includes results of the analysis and illustrates this idea more accurately. Table 4 underscore the distribution of smiling variable between males and females in social interactions. Table 4 underscore involves the frequency of occurrence of smiling between males and females in conversations. Other social attributes like social class and education are not dealt with in the analysis because they are not much revealing in this behavior. Actually, This high tendency of smiling 70.67% among women is related to their feelings of friendliness, affiliation, and closeness which they show towards their partners. Francis, 1979, 519-535. 3.2.3 Pupil dilation. Studies of pupil dilation or pupillometrics reported by Edward Hall, 1974, 845-850, suggest that when people look at a pleasing sight, their pupils dilate, and when they look at something disgusting their pupils constrict. In this respect, direct observation of the population reveals that informants appear to respond to pupil size in conversations. The general tendency observed in the informants is that when they look at a highly attractive person or at a pleasing sight their pupils dilate 73% of the time than when they look at something unpleasant 27%. More than that, under circumstance of stress and discomfort the size of the pupils of the informants decreases 65% of the time in comparison with comfortable situation 35%. It follows that other social attributes such as age categories and social class are not discussed here since they show no influence on pupil dilation. 3.3 Touching. Researchers reveal that the interpersonal distance is crucial in touching between the interaction partners, which means that the person being touched has to be within reach. Furthermore, touching appears to be dependent on situation rules. For instance, during task performance strangers can touch each other in a way that would be inappropriate if they are in an ordinary situation. Besides the nature of the situation, the nature of the relation between people is also important. When touching is more intimate than the relation allows for, this behavior may be viewed as a kind of invasion. I shall discuss this behavior under the following items: touching between opposite sexes, touching between old and young informants. With respect to touching behavior according to gender, there is a general tendency for female informants to show more intimacy through embraces and more touching, especially during greetings and leave-takings, while male informants restrict themselves mostly to shaking hands. The following table illustrates touching behavior between the opposite sexes more accurately. Table 5 _ the frequency of occurrence of touching among male and female informants in conversations. Table 5 _ shows that female informants exhibit a high frequency of touching 73.74% than males do 26.26% in interaction situations. This result reveals more accurately the feelings of intimacy which females show more frequently towards their interaction partners. Another factor which is believed to influence touching behavior is age. The analysis of the data shows a variation in touching between old and young informants. Results are reported in the following table. Table 6 _ the frequency of occurrence of touching among young and old informants in social interactions. The variable reported in Table 5 refer to the number of times touching occurs between the informants according to their age categories. Accordingly, the result in this table show a large difference in touching between old informants 21.29% and young informants 78.71%. A possible explanation of this difference in touching may be due to the bad health condition of old people which restricts their physical activities and also to the decrease in their sexual interest. 0. Nonverbal characteristics of speech. A distinction has been made between voice qualities, pitch and loudness, sounds, laughter, and hesitations during speech. Researchers, like Ekman, 1965, report that paralinguistic can influence the verbal communication. I shall not discuss here the speaking turns, the durations and the interruptions, which are not dealt with in the present study. I shall restrict the analysis to the distinctions reported in the review of literature such as loudness, laughter, and R-filled pauses. 3.4.1 Loudness. In the analysis of loudness, I have dealt with the sex of the informants, their social status and the degree of intimacy between them. The results reveal that these social variables have an influence on loudness during conversations. The following table illustrates this assumption more accurately. Table 7 _ the distribution of loudness variable among the informants in social interaction. Table 7 _ presents loudness during conversations which involves males and females, superior and subordinate informants, and low-distance and intimate informants. The frequency of occurrence refers to the number of times loudness is used during conversations. The duration of loudness is disregarded in the analysis. Accordingly, the most common feature concerning loudness is observed among the opposite sexes. It appears that male informants speak 63.19% louder than do females 36.81%. The anatomical and the psychological researches explain the phenomenon of loudness in male to the differences in the vocal cords between men and women. Other differences in loudness are also observed among low-distance and intimate informants. Actually, low-distance informants speak louder 57.69% in conversations between them. This tendency may be related to the fact that loudness in interactions between a stranger plays the role of keeping the degree of intimacy at an appropriate level. It amounts to this that strangers avoid too much intimacy which is associated with soft speech, like whispering. Conversely, the higher the degree of intimacy between the interaction, the less loudly the interactants speak. Besides, superior informants, high status, speak louder 76.4% than do subordinate informants 23.6% in cross-status encounters. This result confirms the hypothesis of dominance in speech by high-status informants. 3.4.2 Laughter. Direct observation of the informant's uses of laughing shows that the frequency of occurrence of laughing varies in conversations which involves informants of opposite sexes and different degrees of intimacy, low-distance and intimate informants. Other social attributes like status and age are not much revealing and hence, they have not been submitted to analysis. The following table includes the results of this analysis. Table 8 _ the frequency of occurrence of laughing among the informants in social interactions. The figures reported in Table 8 stand for the number of times laughter occurs among the informants on the basis of their sexes and degree of intimacy. In this respect, results in Table 8 reveal that the degree of intimacy between the subjects is crucial in the use of laughing during conversations than the sex of the informants. That is to say, informants who share a high degree of intimacy, close friends, family members, or married people tend to laugh 87.26% of the time more than do low-distance informants 12.74%. Conversations which involve opposite sexes do not show large differences in laughter. Male informants use 40.45% of laughter, while females use 59.55% under the same circumstances. On the other hand, analysis of R-filled pauses during conversations reveals large difference between the opposite sexes. 3.4.3 R-filled pauses. Moore, 1965, 130 to 135, reports that filled pauses, pauses filled with R, A and such, are part of paralinguistic that may influence the verbal communication. For instance, the frequent use of are-filled pauses can be seen as a means of retaining the speaking turn while at the same time searching for words. Moore, 1956, establishes a link between the use of are-filled pauses and uncertainty and hesitations. In the analysis of this device, I shall compare between males and females on the basis of the use of are-filled pauses during conversations. The results are reported in the following table. Table 9 _ the distribution of are-filled pauses among the opposite sexes in conversations. Table 9 presents are-filled pauses in speech in situations involving uncertainty and doubt during conversations. Pauses filled with repletion, changes of words, and stuttering, and unfilled pauses, silence, are not considered in the analysis. Accordingly, results in Table 9 shows that male informants use more of are-filled pauses 65.32% than do females 34.68%. This result confirms the assumption that under circumstances of stress and uncertainty men use more of are-filled pauses, while women tend to laugh more under the same circumstances according to the previous results. 3.5.0 Kinesics. Researchers suggest that kinesics can be influenced by social attributes like sex and age, the nature of the relation between the interactants, and the nature of the situation which involve the conversation like tension-inducing situations. I shall analyze the behavior of kinesics under the following items: gestures, hand and arm movements, and body postures which include movements of the trunk, legs and feet. 3.5.1 Gestures. Friedman, 1972, 120-125, divides gestures, arm and hand movements, into two categories: object-focused movements and body-focused movements. Findings of the analysis reveal large differences between the opposite sexes with respect to object-focused movements in interaction situations. The following table illustrates the results more accurately. Table 10 _ the frequency of occurrence of object-focused movements in opposite sexes interactions. The figures reported in Table 10 stands for the number of times the interactants use object-focused movements in conversations. Object-focused movements which are dealt with in this table are the movement of the hands where the body or an object is touched. In this respect, Table 10 reveals that female informants use more object-focused movements 68.75% in conversation situations than do males 39.25%. The main object-focused movements observed in females are twirling the hair and manipulating belongings. 3.5.2 Body postures. Mole, 1980, claims that the transition from one body position to another signals a change in the emotional and psychological state of the gesturer. I shall discuss this issue using the following criteria: body postures, which involves movements of the trunk, legs and feet, and body orientations, which include direct and indirect body orientation. It follows that the analysis of body postures shows that the sex of the interactants predicts the frequency of this behavior. Furthermore, under circumstances of stress and anxiety, and during interactions with strangers and unlike people, both male and female informants show closed body postures, hands folded, arms crossed and legs crossed either at knees or ankles. Conversely, with liked people and intimate friends, both male and female informants show open body postures, hands not touching and legs uncrossed. The following table illustrates this finding more accurately. Table 11 _ the frequency of occurrence of body postures for gender variable. The frequency of occurrence of nonverbal patterns in Table 11 stand for the number of times the informants, males and females, change their body postures. The form of the body postures and the duration of the movements have been disregarded in the analysis. Accordingly, in closed body postures, the results reveal that female informants show 60.71% of movements than do males 39.29%. This tendency in closed body postures by females discloses their reserved attitudes when interacting with strangers or unlike people. In other words, females use more closed body postures as a kind of barrier against unwelcomed people. Furthermore, in open body postures male informants are observed to use high frequency of movement 65.83% than do females 34.97%. Actually, males show more movements of the legs, feet and arms towards their partners in conversations, which are mainly due to high physical activities in males. On the other hand, in the category of body orientation, the nature of the relation between the interactant appear to be an important determinant of this behavior. The informants tend to show direct body orientation when interacting with partners with whom they share a high degree of intimacy. Conversely, with strangers and unwelcomed individuals, the informants show indirect body orientations. The position of the trunk, feet and legs are either backward or away from the interaction partners. The following table presents the results of the analysis more accurately. Table 12 _ the distribution of body orientation among low-distance and intimate informants in social interaction. The figures reported in Table 12 represent the number of times the informants use direct and indirect body orientations. The duration of the movements and the sex of the interactants are disregarded in the analysis. The results in Table 12 confirm the assumption that intimate individuals show more direct body orientation towards each other. Actually, informants who share a high degree of intimacy like intimate friends or family members exhibit 68.91% of direct body orientations between them, while strangers, informants who do not have an intimate relationship exhibit a high frequency of indirect body orientation between them 69.29%. It follows from this that the nature of the relation between the informants influences their use of body orientation. General conclusion. The results of the study indicate that the interactants who share a high degree of intimacy exhibit a high frequency of NVC between them in conversations. In this respect, intimate friends, family member, and colleagues tend to use the same distance of interaction, personal zone, and the same voice qualities. Equally important, this category of informants display reciprocal NVB in touching, movement of the arm and hand, body postures, eye gaze, and facial expressions. Conversely, stingers or low-distance informants exhibit different NVB patterns towards each other. This tendency is related to the assumption that people often avoid too much intimacy with strangers. Furthermore, the nature of the situation appears to influence the use of NVB. Some NVB like touching and eye gaze seem to be dependent on situation rules. For instance, during task performance interactants show a high frequency of touching that would be considered inappropriate or as a kind of invasion in ordinary situations. In addition to that, in tension-inducing situations both men and women show different NVB patterns. Men tend to use more filled pauses, while women laugh more under the same circumstances. Furthermore, social status plays an important role in defining the patterns of NVB. Actually, interactants who enjoy a high social status show a tendency to demonstrate their authority over subordinate partners through the use of loudness in their speech and more eye gaze dominance. Social status also determines the distance of interaction. Superior interactants often leave a large distance between themselves and their subordinate partners in conversations. In addition to social status, sex reveals significant differences in the patterns of NVB between men and women. In touching during greeting and leave-takings, women show high frequency of touching and smiling. This tendency is related to the feelings of friendliness, reconciliation, and closeness which women often show towards their interaction partners in social situations. Men, on the other hand, show high frequency of R-filled pauses, speak louder and use more body postures. This behavior is due to high physical activities in malls. Other social attributes like age is not much revealing in NVB. The most striking feature is that age appears to influence touching behavior. The bad health condition of old interactants decreases their physical activities and their sexual interests. Old informants exhibit a low frequency of touching, body postures, and arm and hand movements in comparison with young interactants. Accordingly, it could be concluded that the degree intimacy, situational rules, and social attributes, sex and social status have a great influence on NVB, but this influence varies from one category of NVB to another. It is important that this study is limited on only particular NVB patterns which are more frequented among the population, and thus this research does not present a complete picture of NVB in the Moroccan context. For this reason, I would like to call for more research in this field to support the above conclusions and to complete the investigation on the use of NVB in the Moroccan context.